Hi, Todd Martin here with the Walking Code. This is part 3 of my analysis of pose method for running and whether it is a logical, scientific-based movement system or is it complete hogwash as many people would believe. Now, just to go over a brief summary because I posted the 2 previous videos about 5 months ago. In the pose method, the idea is that we do not use muscular force in running. All we have to do is use gravity to fall forward and then pick up the standing leg and then keep cycling through that by replacing the standing leg with the next standing leg, cycle after cycle, using gravity to move us forward. A lot of people believe this makes no sense whatsoever in terms of physics. We need our muscles to get ourselves off the ground, but a lot of people do buy into the pose method, and that's why I did this video series using my own mechanical analysis system that describes how our core, our abdominal, waist muscles, and our hip actions determine all of our movements, whether we're walking or whether we're running, and apply that to the pose method so you can understand whether the pose method makes any sense, and even if it doesn't make sense, why do people believe that it does? So this part 3, I'm going to discuss the details of getting ourselves off the ground and that moment where we're supposed to switch out standing legs without using muscular force. You can go back and watch the 2 previous videos for some of the details, but I'll describe just briefly here. In the pose method, we are supposed to be able to find this pose, standing on one leg, use gravity to fall forward, and then pick up the standing leg and switch it out for the new leg and cycle that through over and over again in order to run. We are not required to use any muscular force to propel ourselves up and forward. We're simply using the force of gravity to move us through space. Does that make any sense? Now, in the previous videos, number 1, I described just the general theory of pose and the idea of falling forward or leaning forward like this. And in part 2, I described the actual mechanics of the push. The push is this motion where we're going from the pose position and falling forward. Is that simply a fall, or are we using muscular force? I described in the previous video that we are not just falling, meaning letting our muscles relax and letting gravity take us. We are in fact using our glutes to push at this time. If we were to fall, we would just collapse. That's what falling is. That's what letting our muscles go and letting gravity take over causes. What's happening in the fall pose method style is we are in fact pushing using our glutes. Our glutes are pushing back against the ground. Our core lower abdomen muscles are tucking the pelvis and also rotating back against the ground, and we are rotating the upper waist forward. So from this position, we are doing this action, which is in fact a push from the glutes using our abdominal core muscles on the right. It requires muscular force to do this. That's why my center of gravity does not drop as I go through the fall. Now I'm going to get into the real magic of the pose method and the swapping out of the legs and why it seems to some people that we can do this without using any muscular energy. Now, I already showed why during the push or the fall in pose method, we are using our energy. And the faster we fall, which is what the pose method describes as how to speed up, the more energy really that we have to use. The faster we fall, the faster we have to push using our core. That is absolutely muscular force being used. But, and here's the trick, that by itself doesn't get you off the ground. I can push very hard and it can get me into a lean up to a certain amount. And pose method describes 22 point something degrees. That is the maximal fall that we can do, or the maximal lean that we can do before we have to do something else to get ourselves off the ground or pull and switch the legs out. That's true. If I keep pushing At a certain point, I have to do something else or I will fall over. I am not going to be able to push myself into the air. So what is it that gets me into the air and allows the feet to swap out? Because just truthfully speaking, you cannot just lift up your leg. At any point in the fall, if I lift my leg up, you will fall so quickly that your leg cannot be retracted and swapped out without your center of gravity completely collapsing. That just cannot happen. There is a force that has to get the body up into the air while the feet swap themselves out. That's why if you watch videos here of other people who are professional runners doing it, and I am not, you can see that their center of gravity does not drop at all during the swap out of the legs. In fact, the center of gravity is rising. I think that most people would understand that the center of gravity cannot rise without using any muscular force to push us off the ground. Gravity works in the opposite way, and gravity works very quickly. If you try to just pull your leg up as fast as you can even try it, your body will be collapsing. You have to hop in order to pull your leg up. Hopping is force going upwards, and then you can swap the leg out while you are traveling upwards. And because of the force of gravity, it might seem that you can hop without changing your height while you swap the leg out. So there, it seemed like I didn't go up, but what I did was propel myself upward just enough against gravity to have time to swap my leg out. Without the hop off the ground, we have nothing except for collapse. But here is what's going on. I described this action of the push, and I'll do it on two legs so you can see without me falling over. Push is this action of rotating the upper waist away from the extending hip, rotating the lower waist towards the extending hip, and extending the hip from the glutes. That's a push. That's a very particular sort of energy that we use all the time. We use that when we are about to walk onto a stair and we push ourselves forward. We're using that same motion. Just try it for yourselves and see if you can feel. Take your right palm, right leg back, push with your glutes, rotating forward from your core and keeping the waist tucked on the right side. See if you can feel that motion. We can do it slowly or we can do it quickly. The faster we do it, the more energy we're needing to use from our muscles. So that's the push. How do we get off the ground then? This is the trick. The getting off of the ground involves turning the upper part of the waist towards the extending hip instead of away from the extending hip. This gets the extra core energy and coordination of our body going. So all of our muscular energy from the waist and the hip is turning towards the foot, pushing it off the ground. It's going to also involve extension of my knee and plantar flexion of my ankle that are all going to come simultaneously just by rotating the upper waist towards this pushing leg. That is the motion that is going to get us off the ground. It's also the motion that is so small that you cannot perceive of it unless you really understand what's going on. We're starting with the push, and I simply turn my waist to the right, and that is going to get me off the ground. Here I'm doing it very slowly with no momentum, but if you try this yourself, I think you'll feel what's happening. As I rotate, everything pushes off the ground. If I do this with my free leg up, the right leg being a free leg, this is what's happening. I'm extending from the glutes, I'm rotating the lower abs backwards on the right, and I'm turning my upper abs to the right also. So all of this core energy is going at the same time in conjunction with extension of my knee and plantar flexion of the ankle. This is the motion that we're doing from the end of the fall or the push. That is what propels the body off the ground. I push And then I rotate the upper abs, and that propels me or pulses me off the ground. You'll see when Usain Bolt runs that when he does this action, you get a thrust of his chest forward. And that thrust of the chest is the moment where the upper waist rotation goes from one direction to the other direction, pulsing all of the energy off the ground. When Usain Bolt is sprinting, he's using enough force to propel himself significantly up into the air. But if we're just jogging or running at a slower pace, we just have to get ourselves off the ground enough to swap the legs out. And so we are pulsing, swapping at the same time. Now I'm going to describe for you, why do we feel like we are just pulling the leg up? This is what pose method describes. Can we just pull the leg up and have them swap out? What you can practice is this, because what's happening is we are using the rotation of the waist and the extension from the glutes during the pulse, and then in order to do the pull, what we're doing is taking the lower abs, which are rotating right now towards my right leg. I'm going to rotate them towards my left leg, now rooting the left leg to the ground, and the automatic action that happens is I retract the energy from the right, and it causes the leg to retract. That is what is perceived of as pulling the leg up. But the action is all coming from the lower ab, releasing the energy from the right, turning it to the left. Practice that right now on your own. All of the waist muscles turning to the right while extending your right hip. Now tuck your pelvis on the left and turn your belly button to the left. That's your lower abs, tucking under. That is going to pull the right knee back and the right heel up towards your butt. But the action is coming from the lower abs, causing the leg to retract. It's also what's going to cause your body to come down and your left leg, in this instance, to come down to the ground. So in this position, I have my glutes still extending, but I have the energy from the lower abs not turning this way, they're turning in the opposite way, tucking the pelvis here. This also results in us landing on the midfoot instead of the heel, which is supposedly one of the benefits of pose method. But it's the energy from the lower abdominal rotation that causes the body to come down onto the midfoot. That is where the magic is happening. Now let's go through our positions from here with the pulse off the ground, then changing the root with the lower abs, which is going to create what's appearing to be the pull. And then now what we're going to do in order to cycle through before the pose is we're going to pull using flexion of my right leg, hip forward. That is going to get me into the pose. Now I can push again from the left hip, and that gets me into the push, and then we cycle through over and over again. I hope this makes sense to you. If you enjoyed the video, then go ahead and click the like button, share the video, subscribe to the channel if you're not already a subscriber, and I'll see you in the next one.